That's Jeff Lindsay on the front of that tandem. He made bicycles here in town, mountain goat bicycles, and me on the back, and we're leading out the racers in the downtown race.
Oh, wow.
That year Tom Bradley came and was our master of ceremonies. And that's me in the mid-'80s here in the shop.
Gosh.
And that's Mr. Pullins in the early 1970s. He's laughing because he just farted. And Jeff Lindsay took that picture. And then some photo person took these beautiful pictures of Mr. Pullins, true in a wheel. He always carried that spoke wrench in his pocket. And when he passed away, his wife said, "You were very special to Burns. Is there anything of his you'd like to have?" And I go, "Well, he always carried that spoke wrench. I'd love to have the spoke wrench." And she goes, "Well, the problem with that is he's carrying it now. It's in his pocket." And, which means, do wheels go out of true in heaven? I wanted to write an article about that. Do wheels go out of true in heaven? And because part of Mr. Pullin's True in Wheels was the social aspect of him coming to the bicycle shop. So that's early 1970s, because we moved over here in 1974, and that's 804 Broadway. And the Hancock Station's now the check cashing place at Oroville Avenue and 8th. And there's Mr. Pullins behind the doors of his 804 building. See him in the window there? And next picture is Kenny Grossman working on a wheel with Mr. Pullins. That's Ken Grossman, 1974.
Wow.
When he first moved to town. And Mr. Pullins sold Harley Davidsons, and there's a picture of him at his house at 1500 Normal on his motorcycle with the sidecar.
Oh, wow.
Because he sold Harley Davidsons and Indians. And here we are when we won the first Best of Chico in 1986, and that's Mr. Pullins. And my wife Katie and my son Connor, who's 37 now, and myself and Mike Williams and Greg Bennett. And that was the picture for the first Best of Chico award.
That's fabulous. And now there's
24 of them.
24. Do you work on it, or does it just happen that you get?
Mostly just happens. Other shops have won it. Campus Bike won it outright one year. But they used to give away something to encourage you to vote. And all the times that a bicycle has been given away, the shop who gave away the bicycle that year won the Best of Chico.
Oh.
Yeah, what a mess, huh?
No, it's great.
Look at all the repairs.
Oh, these are all repairs?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. How long does people have to wait?
A couple days.
Oh, that's
They just
not
don't
bad.
come and pick them up.
Oh. Oh. I love these old Fords. This is like at Collier's.
Oh,
wow.
And then we've had some neat people associated with the business. I sponsored that young woman. She was a nursing major at Chico State. She won the first American medal in mountain biking at the Olympics, 1996 Olympics. She got a bronze medal. Susan DiMattei. I had an employee named Greg Kennebeck who went through Chico State in 3 years, joined the military. They sent him to Walter Reed to go to med school. He became a special forces doctor, went out with the special forces in every hot spot around the world. He just retired as a full colonel. Fascinating guy. I had a woman named Micah working for me, and during the Haiti earthquake 10 years ago, she went down there because a friend of hers was working for an NGO, and she determined that this little village needed a bike shop. And while Bob Troush and company collected durable medical equipment to take down there, Micah collected up a shipping container full of bikes. Cheap bikes, because you'll get murdered for a good bike in Port-au-Prince. Contacted our suppliers, got all these spare parts, contacted the Park Tool Company. They gave her a toolkit, and she went and opened a bike shop in this village that still exists in the shipping container. And then she got accepted into Cal. And I go, wow, way to go. And she goes, well, you're partly responsible for that. And I go, why? And she goes, well, part of the interest was write an essay about a project, a successful project you were involved in recently. And she goes,
Can't beat that one.
She goes, they loved the bike shop in Port-au-Prince, the story. And she goes, and you let me have time off. That's why I was able to do that. And we had a woman working for us several years ago who became the executive director. Well, she worked at the Humane Society, then she became the executive director of Chico. Now she's the volunteer coordinator and special events coordinator for Idaho Falls, Idaho. And we had another woman named Aurelia Gonzalez work for us. And she's getting her master's degree in environmental science, doing a project for the Navy in Pearl Harbor, detailing point source pollution. Navy gets blamed for everything in Pearl Harbor, but she's the first one doing a detailed study of where the pollution's coming from. And the Navy, it was going to cost them several $1 million to do the characterization study, and to send her to grad school was only going to cost a few $100,000. So they sent her to grad school to do this study, and she's getting ready to complete her master's this fall in the University of Hawaii. She's a fabulous person. Been very lucky. I've had really, really neat people work for us.
So you fostered individual success as well as community.
Well, and I also knew that when they worked for me and they would say, I got to go to this conference. Oh yeah, definitely go. This is just a stopping point on your life. No, I totally go for it. We'll be fine. Don't worry about us. And we would just readjust the rest of the employees to work with these folks, because it was a stop along the road. But no, we've had wonderful people work for us. A few kooks, but mostly wonderful people. Like Dan, who works for me now, he's a wonderful human being. And Annie's like me, loves working on bikes. And he loves the people that come in here.
That's great.
My involvement with KZFR, before KZFR, is a supporter of KVMR Nevada City. And that's when I heard about KZFR. And
What show do? You do Celtic music?
Celt Radio.
And what got you interested in Celtic music?
The former Celtic music programmer was Kelly Nolan, whose radio name was Mary Mulcahy, and she did a show called The Celtic Ray. And I really liked it. I mean, I'd heard some Celtic music, and I like bluegrass and such, which is a derivative of traditional Irish, Scottish, and English folk music. Some people will argue with you about that, but that's my belief. And I learned what I knew by listening to Kelly Nolan's show, which got me interested. And then Chris Nelson did the Celtic show after that, and then when she gave it up, they offered me the slot. And I said, well, I'll do it until the first pledge drive, and if I don't get any response, I'd recommend you find someone else to put a different show on here. And I was fortunate to be almost 10% of the pledge drive. So,
wow.
Yeah. It's continuing. Last pledge drive, I was close to 10% of it, 8% of it or something, but I work hard at getting people to send money.
What time is your show for people who want to hear it?
9 to 11:30 on Wednesdays.
So as a history buff, I'm really interested in old Chico businesses, and Pullin Cyclery that you own was started in 1918?
Mr. Pullins acquired it in 1918.
Do you know when it started?
About 1905. It was run by a guy named William Houck, and he called his shop the Junction Cyclery because this is part of town where the north-south and the east-west wagon roads met. And so it was called the Junction. And there used to be the Junction Hotel, and there's interesting photos in the Marion Library special collections of huge hay wagons and stagecoaches and such in this part of town. And the predecessor to the DCBA way back when was the Junction Merchants. They had their own little chamber of commerce kind of for this part of town. And there was the Chico Brewery at 8th and Broadway. And behind that at 8th and Salem was the blacksmith that I knew Nels Anderson when he owned it because he was good friends of Mr. Pullins. So anyway, this part of town's been known as the Junction. So the shop was called the Junction Cyclery. Mr. Pullins acquired it in 1918. And in 1922, the whole block burned down. And when he rebuilt it in 1923, he changed the name to Pullin Cyclery. And he ran it from 1923 till 1984 when he sold it to my wife and I.
Wow.
And he was my mentor, and he was a good friend, and he gave us a really, the deal you couldn't pass on, right? It was just a really good deal.
How old was he when he retired from the
90.
business?
90, and that's the, he died that year. And yeah, he just worked. He it's like me, I enjoy coming to work every day, and I interact with a lot of different people. And I enjoy that aspect of it, and I love bicycles. I started working for Mr. Pullins in 1971 when I went to high school, and it was the second job I ever had, and it was easy. I'm pretty lazy, path of least resistance type guy, and so it was easy and enjoyable, and people respected you more so than my first job was being a busboy dishwasher, and pretty much nobody respects you. So working at the bike shop was great. And I went to Pleasant Valley High School on the east side of town, but working at the bike shop at 804 Broadway allowed me to meet all the Chico High kids and Chico State kids, and so I moved around town with a lot of different circles of friends.
What do you know about in the early days of the store? Did women ride bikes? Was it considered immodest, or could they pedal around as well as men?
Well, they could if they wished. The bicycle was one of the big early emancipators of women. We have a street, West Francis Willard. Frances Willard was a suffragette and a bicyclist, and she liked the fact that bicycles were when women were allowed to wear pants and go out on their own, and they had their bicycle as a form of transportation. And it was almost symbolic of women's liberation back in the 1890s when there was the huge bicycle boom.
They wore big bloomers kind of thing.
And pedal pushers. The term pedal pushers, kind of short pants.
They could wear that in the 19th century?
Yes.
Wow.
And like I said, Frances Willard was a women's advocate and a bicycle advocate.
So did you work at Pullins throughout your adult life, or did you have other jobs before you bought the store?
I had other jobs, but first I'd submit that I'm still not fully involved in adulthood. I'm still kind of clinging to my youth.
Baby boomers are like that.
Yeah, and I'm in a business that allows you to kind of get away with it, to be, I deal with a lot of young people, and I've had a lot of young employees, so I'm sort of clued into the music and stuff, which is fun. But people ask me, did you grow up in Chico? And I say I was born here, but fortunately haven't grown up yet. And I haven't copyrighted that, so you can use it anytime you wish. But I worked for Pullins when I was in high school, and about 1973, the bicycle boom of the late 60s, early 70s kind of waned. And so we were let go, and I worked in the orchards a couple seasons, and I worked for Runke Piano, which was another old business in town, moving pianos. And then Mr. Runke reopened the refinishing shop, which was right down the street here on 8th between Wall and Flume. And my friend Marty Alvis and I refinished pianos for Runke. Marty owns Alvis Heating and Air now. He's an HVAC guy. And he was my roommate for a long time. And anyway, Runke taught us how to spray lacquer and build the wood pieces for the pianos and bit. And I did that for a while. I went back to work for Mr. Pullins in 1979. My friend wanted to take 2 weeks off, so he got me to cover for him, and when he got back from vacation, they fired him and gave me his job. and he did okay, though. He went to Fire Academy and became a Sacramento fireman, so he's long since retired, and I'm still here working.
It sounds like you really like the customer interaction, but do you also fix bikes and ride bikes and race bikes, or?
Not much of a racer. I've done some racing, but I became an avid bike commuter back in the late 60s. You think you're stressed out when you're like 12, 13 years old. The world's coming down on you, and I always rode my bike as kind of a stress reliever. I still do that every time the wheel goes over. It's like a prayer flag or a meditation or something.
Oh, I love that.
And I've been riding a lot during COVID-19, riding and this summer swimming. A lot to be said about what's important, and for me it's riding my bike and jumping in the river or jumping in Chico Creek or jumping in Butte Creek. And we set our rides out to where they end up near a creek at the end, and you just, well, sometimes you go skinny dipping, but usually you just jump in with your clothes on, and by the time you get to town you're dry again. But again, it's a stress reliever, and I can be in kind of a bad mood, but by the time I ride across town to home or from home to work, I'm in a pretty good mood.
And do you like the fixing mechanics part of it?
Love it.
That's great.
I've become like Mr. Pullins. Mr. Pullins didn't really ever adapt to the modern equipment. And I'm kind of like that. I don't appreciate the modern equipment. I don't think it's better necessarily than what came before. And they're constantly changing it.
Oh,
And maybe as you get older, maybe those changes seem to come faster.
what do they call it? Obsolete,
Obsolescence, planned obsolescence.
planned obsolescence.
Maybe, yeah, and I don't care for that. I don't care for companies who do not support their product. And boy, and during this COVID-19, there's been a huge debacle of trade war with China, 35% import tariffs on Chinese-made goods. And all around the world during COVID-19, they said that riding bikes was something you could do. You were separated.
You're outside.
You're outside, yeah. And so all around the world, people started riding bikes, and man, it sucked up every bike and tire and rim and derailleur, and everything has just been absorbed by the demand around the world. So and the companies still haven't got back into full production. And I hear the shipping's all messed up. It's just a mess. And so we've increased the repair work we do because people can't necessarily easily buy a new bike, so they're just fixing up their old bikes. And see, my hands are permanently dirty. But I like fixing things. I don't like throwing things away. And so yes, I enjoy that a lot. And bicycles. I've been on the bicycle advisory board for the city for several decades now, and I'm a believer that bicycles are the salvation of the world. If people would just embrace them, we could solve a lot of problems if people would ride their bikes.
Carbon dioxide emission.
Traffic, yeah. Global warming. There's just a lot of things we could overcome if people would ride their bikes. And I get it, everybody's got their own lifestyle, and some people have adapted their lifestyle to depend on the car. But there's been that thread recently on the internet, how do you like the $4.50 a gallon Biden gas prices? And I go, well, I'm not buying much of it, I'm riding my bike. And I go, and when I do use gas, it's usually for having fun, going, taking the kayaks to the river or going camping or something. I don't squander it going to the grocery store.
You have baskets on your bike to go shopping? Grocery store?
Yes, I have panniers on my bikes, yeah.
Right.
You can't say my bike because I have a ton of bikes.
I bet. So they're this one for long distance and this one for shopping and.
Yeah, they're like silverware at a gourmet meal. I have a lot of tools in the tool drawer for bikes.
Do you have kids?
Yeah, 4 kids.
Are any of them interested in the business?
No, not really. I don't know why.
So what are you thinking in terms of succession, like 20, 30, 40 years ago when you leave the planet, who's going to take over?
There's some people interested in buying it, but I don't really know much about selling it. I don't look forward to the disaster it's going to be purging this place. Plus, every day I get up, I kind of look forward to coming to work. I
If you're
enjoy
doing
it.
a service.
And when it doesn't become fun, I guess I'll go do something else. But right now, my wife's still working, we're working, and we don't have a federally or a government-funded pension, and so we really don't. I haven't done the math. I don't know what we'd have to live on if we dealt with our Social Security and what savings we have. We wouldn't exactly be touring Europe or anything.
Is Mary involved in the business? Because you said you bought it as a couple.
My wife is Katie.
Katie.
Sorry. No, not so much. She owns a daycare. She runs a daycare, a large family daycare, and that keeps her very busy.
Very busy, right.
And her parents are mostly first responders, so she's been super busy during COVID-19 because she has the children of firefighters and police and nurses and doctors and teachers, and so she's very busy. And there's a huge demand for what she does.
What ages kids does she take?
Year and a half to school age, elementary school age.
It's nice when there's that span so they can interact and learn from each other. There's, I don't know, 3 or 4 cycle shops in Chico?
10.
10?
Yeah.
How does that, is it just because of students that 10 can stay in business?
It's a bike town. It's a bike town. We've created quite a nice bike thing here. Our old city manager, Fred Davis, was a bike commuter. And if you look back at the history, the very first bicycle route, which is signed to say bike route, it's called a Class 3 bike route, go from Fred Davis's administrative office to his home on Bonaire in my neighborhood. I live in the Manchester Road neighborhood, and the bike path goes from Fred Davis's office to Fred Davis's house. And he rode an old gold-colored Raleigh 3-speed, and he was good friends with Mr. Pullins. And as he got a little older and had health issues, his family stuck his bike outside, and it deteriorated outside in the conditions. Because when he passed away, I asked his daughter, I'd be honored to have his bike, and she goes, "It was so wrecked, we threw it away." And I'm like, because it could be rehabilitated, and due to that, we were predisposed to be kind of a bike town because Fred Davis, you could say he mismanaged some of the funds for bike funds that we received every year, mostly fixing up streets for cars. But they did, in order to get us entitled to federal money, we had to have a bicycle plan and a bicycle committee.
Oh.
And so a group was put together in the late 70s to create that. And there's been a bicycle advisory committee ever since the late 70s. And that's where Ed McLaughlin came along. I don't know if you ever heard of Ed McLaughlin. He ran the Chico Valley Cycling Club for a long time, and he was largely responsible for getting a lot of individuals involved in city politics. There was a time, once upon a time, where Chico Velo Cycling Club had 1 or 2 members on every board and commission there was in this city, and several members of the city council. And we have moved out from there to be one of the cities that benefits the most from Caltrans and what's called ICE-T money, any Intermodal Surface Transportation Enhancement Act money from the feds. We have benefited hugely around here, and slowly but surely the network's coming together. Our next big project's going to be built next year, I believe. I don't know if COVID-19's pushed it back, but we're going to build a bridge across 20th Street, and we've already been awarded the $12 million from Caltrans to do it.
And just for bikes, the bridge?
Bikes and pedestrians.
Yeah.
And it's going to be just east of the freeway and go up and over the freeway out towards Butte Chico Center and all the businesses and such south of 20th Street. It's difficult to get 20th Street's a dangerous place, and East Park Avenue's a dangerous place, so this will allow cyclists an option to stay off the roads. And that's how I position the argument with car drivers who think it's a waste of tax dollars. I always go, I'm trying to get the bikes off your street. I'm trying to get them on their own facilities so they won't be bothering you. And most of them buy into that.
Have you been to Amsterdam?
I have not.
You would love it because everybody rides a bike. I'm sure you've heard. And there's people of all ages. Here you mostly tend to see younger people.
No, Chico's got a great wide swath of the population that rides bikes. And again, when gasoline gets $4.50 a gallon, the bikes come out of the garage and they start being used. But no, if you go to an intersection like Mangrove and Vallombrosa in the morning before school starts, each cycle of the light on Vallombrosa for folks westbound into town, there'll be 30, 40 bicycles queued up there at the stoplight, which to me is very encouraging.
Absolutely.
And when the traffic's really bad, you can actually get across town quicker because the bicyclists can go through Bidwell Park. Motorists kind of have to go around or over it. And so bicyclists, the park is a lot more porous for bicyclists, and so that's the big stumbling block for north-south traffic is the park and the creek and the university. So if you're in a car, I could pretty much meet you at my house. I'd be on a bike, you'd be in a car. We'd get there approximately the same time. Yeah.
It seems like a big bike problem in this town and others, I'm sure, is theft.
Oh, yeah.
So, and you know, you have these elaborate, huge walks that look like no one could get through them, and they do it. So what do you suggest to people is the best kind of lock for your bike?
Your human eye is the best lock if you could watch your bike. I go the opposite way. And instead of buying an expensive lock, I ride a cheap bike. And you'd never know, if you saw me pull up at Collier Hardware to go buy a nut or bolt, you wouldn't know I owned a bike shop because I ride a nondescript black English 3-speed around from the 1960s. It's a nice bike, but I intentionally don't clean it. It doesn't have a fancy seat on it. It's not fancy. Everything's bolted on, no quick releases. Because I have those other bikes for other reasons, but I have a town bike just for running errands.
But what if you're a student and you go to class for 2 hours, you can't look at your bike?
No, you want to, what's known as a U-lock. Long shackled U-lock is the best because it gives you more freedom of how you can lock it up. And then you want a cable or a chain to wrap around everything else on your bike that's removable. And the main thing is locking your bike, because you may or may not be surprised at how many people don't lock their bike or lock it completely inadequately, like wrap a cable around the front wheel and not around the frame, and the thief just pops the quick release and takes the bike and finds a new wheel for it later. You know, and then also, it's also important for you to know what kind of bike you have and to know the serial number. The police really can't take a bike away from a thief if you don't know the serial number, because that's the marker that lets them know that is a particular bike.
It's like the VIN on a car.
Exactly. So most bike shops would allow you to come in and they'll help you find the serial number on your bike, but it's critically important to write that down.
Oh, that's good to know.
Yes.
Is it more likely to steal a man's bike than a woman's bike, or thieves don't care?
No. The druggies, they don't care. They'll steal anything, or they'll steal parts off your bike if they can't steal the whole thing. And so many of them are stolen, I really don't know how much value they have monetarily. I just believe it's street currency, because they wheel and deal, and if you go to the big encampments, you just see piles of bikes that have been stripped. And that's pretty disgusting to me. I'll see a bike, and it might be a Trek frame, but it's got a set of wheels off a Specialized, and the seat came off a Giant, and the stem came off a Marin, and it's 5 or 6 or 7 stolen bikes. It's not just one.
The encampment, you mean where unhoused people live?
Yes, exactly. And then there's folks that are just like professional thieves. They're just scumbags. And I actually made an appointment with a friend of mine who's a counselor to talk to her about my dark thoughts about thieves. I do not like thieves. And she tried to teach me to be angry at the crime, not the criminal. But that's hard to do. It's hard to separate it out because it's the same individuals. You see them over and over and over again stealing bikes.
How do you know?
I'm in the bike business.
I mean, how do you know it's the same individual? You see them
I see
stealing?
them. Oh, yeah. They come in here.
To do what?
can I borrow a 6mm Allen wrench so I can change my stem? And a lot of times I let them do it because that lets me get a good look at the bike. And a lot of times we recover bikes that way. They roll in with a stolen bike, and you'll go, do you realize you're riding a stolen bike? And they want to argue with you about it. No, I bought it. Where? City Plaza. Well, that's legitimate. Or I traded a skateboard for it or some crazy stuff. And we recover a lot of bikes that way because the thieves bring them in the store. And I don't know, that they don't think that we don't know that the bike's stolen. I have just a book of stolen bikes and serial numbers, and I recover a lot of stolen bikes in the store and out on the street. Most of the individuals don't want to have contact with the police, and so I give them that option. I go, you can hand the bike over to me, I'll get it back to its owner, or you can have interaction with Chico PD today. It's your call. And most of them are paroled or they have issues. So far I haven't been killed. The cops tell me that it's coming, that somebody's going to attack me. And I've only been in one physical altercation with one guy. And we've recovered in the last few years, we've recovered close to 300 bicycles.
And then how do you track down the owner?
There's a page on Facebook called Chico Stolen Bike. And the smart victims go to the bike shops with pictures of their bikes. And I tell them don't post the whole serial number, just post the last 4 digits. And we know bicycles, and I see bicycles go by, and I know which ones are stolen, which ones aren't. I haven't been doing it lately, but I used to keep a crib sheet in my wallet of serial numbers. Again, it's amazing, but you catch a thief, you flip the bike over, and you have a piece of paper with the serial number written on it, and sure enough, it's the serial number on the stolen bike. And one guy told me, he goes, I think you just made that number up and got lucky. And I go, trust me, I wouldn't be in the bike business if I could figure out a combination of letters and numbers out to the 12th digit accurately. I'd be doing something else completely, horse races or stock market.
Yeah.
I don't know. I go, they're funny. Their thought process is odd. And I think they generally think you're going to back down because they posture like they're ready to fight. And if you look like you're ready to respond, they don't quite know what to do. It's like, because they will go to jail for getting in a fight.
Oh.
They won't necessarily go to jail for a stolen bike, but if you get into a physical battery situation, they will go to jail. And so they tend to avoid that. At least that's been my experience so far. But I'm respectful to them, and I just inform them of the situation, and most of the people will give up the bike because they can go steal another bike later.
Do they have special tools to cut locks?
Yes, there's a tool store in town that doesn't have a pursuit policy for shoplifters, and the shoplifters all know it, so they just go out there and get tools. Have you ever been to the grocery store where somebody fills up a grocery cart and it just rolls it out the door, and if the employees try to stop them, the employees will be terminated? So the businesses just absorb. I feel stupid because I'm buying my groceries, and these folks are rolling out several $100s worth of groceries, and there's a no pursuit policy. You'll note that Safeway at Mangrove now has security guards, and sometimes at night there's armed security guards in the parking lot. Because I talked to one of the controllers several years ago at Safeway on Nord, and she said they would lose $1,200 of hard alcohol a day. So that's $400,000 in a year. And you and I are picking up the slack of that shrinkage. We're paying for it in terms of higher grocery prices. And I wrote letters to the CEO saying, I'm tired of paying more for groceries for these knuckleheads to steal stuff.
They lock up the cigarettes and stuff. Can't they lock up the alcohol?
They do a lot of the expensive stuff,
Yeah.
but no, it would take an employee to go unlock the thing all the time.
Right.
And now if you go to like Walmart, the bike inner tubes and everything's all locked up. Because again, that's something that lower income people are very interested in the bike stuff, and they shoplift it. So the stuff's locked up, and you got to push a button, and then somebody comes and helps you. Yeah. And you see that more and more. Or you see them just quit selling certain products because it's so theft prone.
Oh, wow. I know that you're interested in politics, and I wondered why the city council is in a liberal college town is mostly conservatives who are not probably interested in bike trails and that kind of thing. What happened?
That's the current city council. My opinion is that we had a lot of conservatives move in after the Camp Fire. The population went up by, up 20, 30,000 overnight.
Oh.
And Paradise was significantly more conservative than Chico, Paradise, Magalia. And then last year we had the Bear Fire, and we had a lot of individuals who were, I call them living lightly, up in the woods, up in Berry Creek and stuff, and they got burned out. And they appeared on the street, and I didn't recognize them, so I'd speak to them. And they said, yeah, the Bear Fire burned up everything. And they looked pretty good the first couple of weeks, but then they just start to, they either get taken care of or take care of themselves with their own resources, or they start to deteriorate. And I think that just living on the streets like that, a lot of them, if they're not suffering from mental health issues going in, it definitely escalates as they're on the streets. And there's a lot of really lovely people who are on the streets. They're wonderful people. And then, like I said, there's a lot of folks with substance issues, and there's a lot of folks with mental illness issues that just is not addressed by our society. We're not dealing with it because maybe rich people have to pay more taxes or something. I don't know. It's tragic.
Well, I talked to a police officer, and he said his main work is dealing with homeless. We're paying him a good salary. So I think you could argue cost effective to give people mental health care and addiction recovery programs rather than...
Yeah. So that's the current council. Last year there was a downtown business person who formed up the group Safe Chico or Keep Chico Safe or something, and she posted up the homeless camps in City Plaza and placed the blame squarely on the progressive city council that was seated at that time. Well, it's been about a year now. She posted it up October 22nd, 2020 and said get out and vote. So we have her hand-chosen council now, and today she posted up about City Plaza and how it's back in the same state it was a year ago, and it was on Facebook. And so I said, well, last year you blamed the council. I go, are you going to start a recall movement, or who are you going to blame? Who are you going to assign blame to? I go, because like I said last year, the issue exceeds the city limit lines of Chico. It's a huge social issue, and I don't know what happened in the last few decades because the number of folks unhoused is just exponential growth. And some folks go, well, we never had homeless people back in the day. Well, we did, but they were less. I think the Romans determined that 10% of the population is incorrigible back in Roman times. My mother was the assistant veteran service officer for Butte County, and she had a lot of individuals that came to her office that had PTSD. They called it shell-shocked or battle fatigue or whatever in World War II and the Korean War. And so they were World War II and Korean War and Vietnam War era guys. And they lived mostly then down by the railroad tracks. They lived out in the orchards and such. They had substance issues. Most of them were alcoholics. They might have been drugs, but I wasn't that aware of that then. And there was a number of them because I knew them because my mother would take money out of her pocket and give these people money, or I'd come home from school and there'd be some individual weeding the rose garden, and they'd say, oh, hello, Mrs. O'Brien's paying me to weed the rose garden. And there'd be phone calls at 2 o'clock in the morning from veterans who really needed a psychiatric intervention, but they had to go to the Veterans Hospital in Livermore or something, and my mom would arrange transportation for them to get to the hospital. And there was a bunch of vets, like there are now, a bunch of veterans watching after each other who would haul these guys to the Veterans Hospital. And so that's not new. It's just, there's just more people in need these days.
So you're saying the city council became conservative because of people's fear of the unhoused and the
Part of it, yeah, and that we had a more conservative slant electorate because they'd moved
The
down from the
fires.
campfire. I would submit the last few years the whole freaking world's gone a little bit nuts. It's really people's behaviors are people seem to be a little less filtered.
well, Trump definitely set the tone for that.
Well, he did, but the internet sets it because I believe the internet gives people a certain level of less exposure, and they're sitting at home with their little camera in front of their video screen, and they drop their filters and just say what comes to mind. I don't like Zoom meetings because I prefer to be in a room with people where I can look at them and determine they act politer when you're face to face because there's certain societal norms, in my opinion, that haven't broke down yet, and we act a
Interesting.
different way in person than we do insulated by the internet. And I also have dealt with people since 1971 in a service business, and I've learned to spot the people who are ready to take advantage of you and people who lie to you and such. And I feel like I'm pretty good at that, pretty good at reading people. And I'm not as good at that over the Zoom meetings as I am face-to-face. And I prefer face-to-face stuff.
And a lot of time you don't see the whole body for the body language.
And you don't know who else is in the room. You don't know who else is listening because, like, I was on the KZFR board and we had closed sessions, and you would see board members speaking to somebody that was with them. Well, that person's not supposed to be in a closed session of a board meeting, and who is it? And I don't know if anybody else noticed it. I made mention of it. Like, who's there with you? Or who are you talking to?
My dog.
Yeah, whatever. So I didn't care for that, and I would like the meetings to come back to public and one-on-one stuff. But again, I'm an older guy, so that might be just part of our upbringing.
Winding up here, what advice would you give to someone who wanted to start a business like this? Who, like a young person, they're majored in business, they go, okay, I want to start my own, I want to be an innovator, entrepreneur.
You have to be prepared to work. I notice businesses fail, and my business isn't like making money hand over fist. We're surviving. But I've seen people open businesses, and it's lost on them that they have to work a lot.
Oh,
You see them work their shift, and they're not there early and they're not there late. And you really have to kind of be passionate about what you're doing. You have to pick something carefully, and if you don't like what you're doing, you're going to be terribly unhappy. I'm just lucky that I like what I'm doing now. Long term, I would suggest that I might have done something else. Like I'd love to have been a fireman. I'd love to work in a national park somewhere. And I do recommend people find careers that have some kind of funded pension and medical care and such, and that's going to be more and more important as time goes on. Because I figure the baby boomers will pretty much bankrupt Social Security because there's a lot of us, and we're going to live longer than folks anticipated, I believe. So, yeah, you have to be passionate about it, and you just have to be prepared to work.
people say you don't make money for at least the first year, so you have to have capital to back you up.
I've never had capital, yeah, never. We bought this place on a personal note from Mr. Pullins, and when I paid off the principal, he never charged me interest. He brought his agreement, and he was worried about dying before I'd paid off the interest, and he was worried that his family would try to change the deal, and he brought me his 2 copies of the contract and advised me to rip them up and keep mine. because he said those were the only three that existed. He got one from his attorney, and then him and me. And so he did me a solid favor, because
Yes.
what we originally invested in this place, we have days of business now that are greater than what we first put down on this business in 1984. But it's a tough business, and there's a lot
Especially
of folks.
with the 10 shops. I mean, how do you?
Well, 10 shops, and I also compete against Walmart and Target and Dick's Sporting Goods and
Amazon.
and Amazon, yeah, and Bikes Direct and all these different companies. As a matter of fact, in Chico, A Main Hobbies down on 20th Street, they're one of the larger internet bicycle dealers in the world. They have a warehouse out on Otterson Drive, and they've bought up most of the online bicycle sellers that were around. Bike Nash Bar and Dan's Competition, which was for BMX bikes, and I'm missing the whole bike. I said Bike Nash Bar. Anyway, they bought them up, and now they're pretty much run out of Chico. Yeah.
So how do you brand your Pullins as different from Mike Peavy's shop or this shop or that shop?
We're very polite to our customers. We're very nice to our customers. We've been the most involved in the community, which I think is very important. I was born here, so I have a vested interest in being respected and to give back to the community and just be part of the community.
And you have a big network of people who know you, I'm sure.
I do. A lot of people know me that I don't know them, if you can grow up in a town and be respected, if nothing else, if you can be respected in your hometown, that's quite a nice life goal. People know you. They admire the way you do your business, and you don't cheat people. And like I said, you're admired and respected in your community and known, which is very, very gratifying.
Right. They say you have to send a message 6 times to get people to know your name, and you don't have to do that because it's been around for so long. People know Pullins.
Yeah, and they know they can reliably send somebody to us, and we're not going to rip them off. And then I'm the opposite. I have friends that are in various trades that I like and go to, and I've gotten to a point where I don't. And you have to be a real close friend for me to recommend anybody, because my guys have gotten so busy that they won't necessarily have time for you. But they always have time for us, which is great. But I don't necessarily recommend people because they get too damn busy, right? You're doing them a favor, I guess, but they're like us. You can get too busy and get to a point where it's just a grind.
Okay, last question. If you had unlimited money and power, what else would you do to make Chico a bicycle mecca and model bike community?
I don't know. I think we've created it. I mean,
Wow.
Ed McLaughlin's work and the continued work of folks like Ann Schwab, and her husband own Campus Bicycles, and Kirk Monfort, and
Billy Cantor.
yeah, and Billy Cantor, and Russ Mills was an engineering professor at Chico State, and just LaDonna Carnegie, who's a geography professor, Walt Schaefer, and a number of other people I'm missing, just have put the time in, and it becomes becomes automatic. I had a fellow from Caltrans tell me after one of our projects, he said, well, it's always easy to fund projects in Chico. He goes, because you people make us look good.
Oh.
You make these beautiful projects with art elements, because we get grief for people who say, why'd you waste the money on that art?
The mural or whatever.
Whatever, yeah. And then the Caltrans people who are funding it say, you have the art element, and you've designed it with ADA compliance, and it's just a beautiful project. And we always like how Chico takes the extra step to, it's not just a public works project, it's a nice civic focus point, and it drives up the value of houses. Towns like this who have parks and bike paths and such, your house is worth 15% more than if you're in a town that didn't have those facilities. And so that's why people are still moving here. It's got a lot of problems, but it's also got a lot of positives compared to a lot of other places.
Well, the university is a big one, a big plus.
It's a huge one, yeah. University, all these folks who've attended the university that wanted to continue to live here.
Yeah.
Build.com, plumbingsupply.com, A-Main Hobbies, what's the t-shirt place at the airport, all those companies. Sierra Nevada Brewery, fabulous businesses.
Those are all Chico State alum?
Well, Kenny Grossman, I don't think he's got honorary college degrees, but I don't think he got a college degree. He worked here, he worked here back in the day. That's how I met him. We worked in the bike shops together. And his dream was to own Pullin Cyclery, but instead he started brewing beer. And
made a lot more money.
yeah. His jet's better than mine. But again, though, look how much money his family has plowed back into this community. Have you seen the new Humane Society out on Garner Road? Well, what I heard is that Walmart wanted to put a superstore out there on the little golf course. So the Grossmans bought it to keep that from happening.
That's great.
And so they own that property, and the little golf course folded up, and now there's this beautiful Humane Society building out there. And Kenny's wife, Katie Gonzer, has been a big supporter of the Humane Society and been deeply involved on the board of directors. And go look at that facility, and I can guarantee you that's got, we've all helped 10 ounces at a time, 12 ounces at a time, helping to pay for that. It's a beautiful facility. And again, the Grossmans are big supporters of bike stuff, big supporters of KZFR radio, big supporters of my NSPR, big supporters of very positive things. And they have really done a lot for this community. And he used to work here when he first moved to town. He worked here at the bike shop. He's a great bike mechanic, just one of the best intuitive bike mechanics I've ever met.
Wow.
Yeah, it's still kind of a struggle for me at times, but Ken was just intuitively bright when it came to things mechanical.
So that helped him build the brewery. And
yes, he got a bunch of old junk and built the first brewery. The brewery parts came from 7-Up Bottling Company and Fritz Maytag's Anchor Steam Brewery, and we'd go out there and do after-hours work on the brewery on Gilman Way, and there was a time where I was unemployed, and I'd go work at the brewery during bottlings and such, and I never ever saw what it would become, and I never thought to ask Ken for a job. If I'd been there, I'd have been one of the first 5 or 6 guys. He paid me with beer, and it seemed like a pretty good deal to me. But great people to know. Like they've let me do fundraisers for KZFR in the big room. Let me host bands in there. Unbelievable to have access to something like that, just on a conversation.
Yes.
And a friendship. It's amazing.
They're an incredible employer. They have like on-site therapists and health care and free beer for the employees, and I don't know what else. But they're probably the best employer in the town, do you think?
Maybe. How about the university?
They don't give people free beer.
It's probably not free at the brewery. Those people earn it.
Yeah.
It's funny though, with the bottlings I would work on, a big bottling day was 150 cases.
Wow.
They do that about every 15 seconds now.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
And COVID doesn't hurt people.
No, people drink more beer.
Yeah, right.
Have you ever read Sometimes a Great Notion by Ken Kesey?
No.
One of the main characters of the book is the guy who owns the bar in this lumber town, and when things are good, people drink, and when times are tough,
They
people
drink.
So, yeah, there's a lot of people stayed home and drank beer.
Sometimes here in Nevada.
Yeah, a lot of times for me. Yeah, that's kind of my go-to.
Anything else that you'd like people to know about bikes or the history of Pullins or community spirit or any of the things we've touched on?
Support the community radio station. It's a beautiful little thing. It's amazing. We went to a Christmas party several years ago, and my wife goes, "That is about the largest assembly of kooky people involved in something in this town." And I go, "Yeah, kind of different group." And she goes, you seem to love those people." I go, "I do, and my only commonality is the radio station. I don't hang out with them rest of the time." And I go, and she goes, "And you people keep that station on the air for 30 years? She goes, "That's just astonishing." And it is.
Yeah, but that's problematic because there are not very many young people involved.
Well,
as
we got to work on
programmers.
that in all aspects of stuff. All aspects of stuff. Political things. I'd always take young people that were working for me that had some level of interest in the politics. I would take them to the dinners and I'd buy them dinner. And some folks in this all progressive politics, some folks would go, "I appreciate the way you get this, Steve, and you're always bringing the young folks along." And I go,
That's
"Yeah, look at this
important.
crowd. It's silver hairs.
I know.
Silver hairs, and we don't have the energy we used to just go whole hog into things." I can do a sideline, tell you a funny story.
Okay.
Were you here when they wanted to build Rancho Arroyo up against the north property line of Bidwell Park?
I don't know.
They wanted to build a bunch of houses up there, thousands of houses up
By
along the
Upper
North
Park?
Rim Trail on the north side of the park, so it looked kind of like the south side of the park does now with Canyon Oaks and Falcons Point and all those houses up on the hill, ruining the view shed. So the project finally got approved, and then we did a referendum. And we gathered up the signatures to have a special election to have the public decide above and beyond the council whether this should be built or not.
How can they have it without an environmental impact report?
Oh, they did. They did all the steps. They
Oh,
did
wow.
all the steps. And they got approved by the council because the council whittled it down to where there was finally only 1,500 homes or something. Originally it was 4,500 homes. So the developers had over $300,000 in their war chest, and our side scraped together $13,000 to oppose them.
Wow.
Only one person, Kelly Mayer, gave more than $15. But we had people power, and we hit the streets, and we did postcards and such. But the really great thing was, in those days, they still allowed the rice fields to be burned off. So it looked like this, smoky. It's late October, it's right before the election. Well, anyway, Ed McLaughlin, the bike guy, knew that if you pushed a certain pedestrian crosswalk button on a particular street, it would start a traffic jam. Starting there, that would morph out, would metastasize out into the city and first block Mangrove and First Avenue, and then that would block First Avenue and the Esplanade. It would block Vallombrosa and Mangrove, which would stop up Second and Main, and this thing just spread out and just wrecked the traffic pattern. So we'd go out there about 4:30
In the
and
morning.
in the afternoon. And we'd have our signs saying, "You think traffic's bad now, wait till there's 9,000 more more cars a day coming from this project." And the rice farmers set their fields on fire. The air was terrible. The traffic was terrible. People would have to sit 3 or 4 cycles of the light at Mangrove and Vallombrosa to get through there. And we were all positioned with our signs. But anyway, election night came, and I had signed the ballot argument against this project. And I tell you, I was physically ill that night. I was throwing up because I just figured we were going to get our butts kicked. And we got just under a supermajority vote to destroy this, to stop this housing project.
Oh.
And it's because Ed McLaughlin knew that you could bottle up the city by pushing this one crosswalk button and walking across the street, then pushing it again and walking back.
That's brilliant.
It's
So
great guerrilla
warfare,
politics.
Yeah.
And those guys, the developers skipped town and didn't pay their bills. Yeah, that's who we were dealing with. And so that was a really one of the high points in my political life.
What happened to that land that they were planning to develop?
We bought it. The city bought it. And now it paid for itself because the Nexus study that provided for sanitary sewer the developers had paid fees for that. So we had to buy it back from them. But we bought it back from them at the same price they paid for it. And as the years went on, the city was able to sell that for more money than it was originally. The city had to pay back to the developers, and so the whole property thing repaid for itself with a surplus, and now it's just kind of protected as open space, and it protects the park. I personally think the California park stuff up on the hillsides is just a travesty. Those houses should be back further so we don't have to look at them. And that astonishes me too. You ever go up to Canyon Oaks? Who lives in those houses and what do they do for a living?
They're gated and...
They're gated, but you just get behind a FedEx truck, and when they go in, you just follow them on in and go look at those houses. They're multi-million-dollar houses in Chico, and in Chico that'll get you a pretty nice shack. And I'm just always astonished. I know a radiologist who lives up there. I knew the former school superintendent lived up there. But in the last few years, all these houses have been built, and I puzzled over what these people do. They might be equity refugees from the Bay Area or Los Angeles, whose houses just went up in huge prices. And when they sold, you have to dump the money into something, so they parked it in their property. But it just astonishes me, the houses up there, and the houses out off of Hicks Lane that are being built now. Astonishing, big, sprawling houses pushing the development out and out. Because I was on two general plan task force, and I was on the planning commission, and I got to do 2 terms on the park commission, which is something I always wanted to do. And then I was on something called the Parking Place Commission. It doesn't exist anymore, and I got to be I've been on the Bike Advisory Committee. I was on the Humboldt Road Burn Dump Committee to resolve the burn dump up here off of Humboldt. I did a term on the school board, and my wife points out we were always controversial. But long term, if you live long enough, you see that your policies, a lot of other people see that your policies were kind of a little more far-sighted than they appeared to be when you were enacting them. And you just have to live long enough to see where people agree with you, like, oh, that guy's not near as crazy as I thought.
Well, are you going to run for city council sometime?
No, never.
Why?
It takes too much time. It's too much stress. And if you do a really good job, your detractors never do like you, and your supporters start to question you, because really good policies right there in the middle where the good work's done. I was on the school board, and I became good friends with Anthony Watts, who's a noted climate change denying right-winger. But in my mind, he's a very nice person, educated, and we'd go to lunch. And his side worried about him, and my side worried about me, because we're out palling around and enjoying ourselves. And I would tell people, they go, "Why are you hanging out with that guy?" And
He's a human being.
I go, "Have you looked at his voting record on the school board?" "No, he's a right-wing kook." And I go, "He's got kids in the school district. His voting record is 100% when it comes to the important stuff." I go, "And if you can't get off your little point of interest and support people who do the really good policy work, and no matter what their voter reg is, they do good work, and he's a solid guy. He reads the agendas and he does the work, and in my opinion his voting record was 100% on the important stuff, and all the other stuff, yeah, it's inconsequential." I go, "And as to his politics, don't get in the hole with these people and their politics. Stay above that, and like you say, be human with them." And he and I got along famously.
I interviewed Scott Huber, and he's an example of what you said about how
we were
difficult.
on the school district, school board together.
Yeah.
We all went to the eclipse together. Scott and Anthony Watts and I went to the total eclipse up in Oregon together.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just felt sorry that Scott had to go through all that because he's got a good heart.
Yeah.
And to attack
tough.
his wife, I mean,
It's
that's
tough, and
ridiculous.
who wants to deal with that?
Yeah.
On the school board, I got death threats and weird
Oh.
phone calls and
On the school board?
yeah, oh yeah, yeah. You know, but long term, it's been proven that we were correct, and it's what Anthony said. He told one of his guys that questioned the fact that I was hanging out with him. He said that he goes, my friend was questioning our friendship, and I told him, O'Brien's got my back. He goes, we're in the trenches together, and that guy's got my back, and he's a good. He described me like I described him. Good guy, family, business person, and just trying to do what's best for the community, whether the community realizes it or not. And like I said, it takes some time sometimes for people to get on the to get with what you were trying to accomplish. And I'm not particularly smart or anything, but I've been fortunate to be where I am when I was there. Even all the ugliness that we got associated with on the school board. Someone goes, that must have been awful. And I said, no, it was fascinating. Watching people and watching the mucky mucks of Chico behave poorly. I go, I got deep personal satisfaction. Somebody posted on Facebook yesterday, if you think you've made bad life decisions, keep in mind that somebody just married Matt Gaetz. Congressman Matt Gaetz got married.
No.
And he goes, yeah.
Was she 17?
Don't know. I don't know. But I said, you think you've made poor decisions. Someone just married Matt Gaetz. So you're clear.
Oh, my goodness. Oh.
All right. Well, I can talk all day and all night.
Thank you.
Yeah. I hope you